My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today is going to be ADHD Part 2. The question I'm going to try to answer is, why is ADHD so difficult to diagnose? Number one, because there does not seem to be any clear and conclusive diagnostic test to determine ADHD. Now, in the year 2019, the American Psychology Association said that neuroimaging has absolutely no value in determining ADHD, meaning that, number one, we don't have a blood test, and now we don't have x-rays. However, if we start to do a little bit more research, we end up coming up with the same person over and over again that says something different. And his name is Dr. Almond. He owns the Almond clinics, and he relies on Spect Imaging to determine ADHD. However, this becomes a little bit difficult here, because do we believe that Dr. Almond is onto something that really no other medical doctor, no other psychiatrist, and no other mental health clinicians are aware of, and they don't understand Spect Imaging? We have to at least take a look at that. Maybe Dr. Almond is onto something here. However, when we try to determine validity in science, we have to depend on peer-reviewed information. And as we look into this, in Dr. Almond's case, none of his peers agree with him. And they believe, and I'm quoting here, that he's a snake oil salesman. Now, Spect Imaging has been around since the 1970s, and it's been determined not to be able to be used to diagnose ADHD, depression, anxiety, school failure, or life achievement. All of these things that Dr. Almond says that Spect Imaging does. Now, to be fair, in 2021, the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine did endorse Spect Imaging. So we do have one organization on his side, but as far as I researched, that's the only one I could find that's on his side, and it's extremely difficult to find any of his peers that actually agree with him. And this is very interesting because many doctors, most of the time, I would say, they actually stick up for other doctors, they support other doctors, and it's very rare where one doctor goes out of their way to badmouth another doctor, to try to cause some type of harm to that doctor, unless, of course, they're trying to save a bunch of people. Now, I have an example of one of his peers, and this is what he says. Dr. Almond should have his medical licensure stripped for this clear and fraudulent use of a neuroimaging technique that takes advantage of those that are not scientifically savvy. There is no way on earth that this approach helps anyone beyond a placebo effect. And then it gives another list of a whole bunch of articles and other people that also basically say the same thing. So again, I'm not here to tell anybody what to believe. I just give out the information, and you could do with it with what you want. But knowing that very few people, if anybody, are on his side when he says that there actually is a test called Spect Imaging that can determine ADHD. Now, the SPECT scan that he gives, it's actually pretty interesting, and I do think that there might be some value to it. What he does a brain imaging scan of a person while they're completely relaxed. And then he does another scan while they have to concentrate or to focus on something. What Dr. Almond says here is that when a person with ADHD tries to focus on something or concentrate, what happens is he can see that a lot of the blood flow moves from the prefrontal cortex, which is logic and reasoning, and it moves to different areas of the brain, including the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. Therefore, it makes it much more difficult for a person to concentrate and to focus. Now, this makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. The only problem with it is that he is describing what happens in almost everybody's brain when they have to concentrate on something where they experience some type of stress or anxiety. this is not determining ADHD. I'll give you some examples. Let's say you need to take a test, and this test is very important to you. It could be a driver's test, could be a test to get licensure to be a therapist. I know plenty of amazingly intelligent therapists that when they go to take the state boards, they freeze because they're having a trauma response, because they know that they put so much time and money into this that if they fail this test, then they don't get licensed. And they tend to concentrate on that rather than to concentrate on the material in front of them. And that happens a lot, unfortunately. But that's not a symptom of ADHD. That's a symptom of being stressed when you're doing something. Now, when we look at something like sports, for example, we very much put people on pedestals, and they are paid for their ability to handle what they have to do under tremendous stress. Now, when we're looking at professional athletes, there's not a whole lot of difference between even the best professional athlete and the worst one. All NFL players, all basketball players, all hockey players, they're all amazing. What separates a lot of them is the fact that they can still do their job at an incredibly high level, no matter what the stress level. For example, if someone in basketball is going to line up to take a foul shot, there's 2 seconds left on the clock, you need that shot to win the game. At that point, what you want to do is you want to have this person not get into their amygdala, not get into the fear center, not get into the reptilian part of their brain. Therefore, when they're going to have incredible anxiety and stress, and they might choke. A person like that is going to end up losing the game. A person who can manage their stress, manage potential trauma, is going to do much better. So if we have this basketball player, for example, and if we were to look at his or her brain, and we notice that it started to move into the fear center, that's not a symptom of ADHD. Like Dr. Almond is saying, it's not at all. I'll give you another example. If you were to ask people, and they've done studies on this, what is the thing that makes you the most scared? What is the thing that would raise your anxiety the most? What are you most afraid of? The number one answer most of the time is public speaking. All right, so let's take that. Now, that's interesting because public speaking is the number one thing that people are afraid of, even more than dying. So if you go to a funeral, that means most of the people who are going to that funeral are actually more afraid to do the eulogy than they are to be in the coffin. Think about that. That shows you how our brain works. We're afraid to do wrong things. We're afraid to be in front of a bunch of people. We're afraid to be judged. Is this somehow determining ADHD? No, it's not. It's not at all, like Dr. Almond is saying. Now, do these Spect Imaging, can it in some way maybe be something that's valuable? I think it could be. I think maybe you can train like a surgeon on this. You can see where their brain is, that then you could say, listen, you were not concentrating as much as you could because you were in the fear center of your brain. So maybe there's ways that we can teach people to really focus down on something, right? Maybe we could do this with airline pilots, something like that. But you're not testing and determining ADHD here. The other thing that's interesting about Dr. Almond is, as much as every professional disagrees with him that you can't determine ADHD with the Spect Imaging, what does he really stand for? And here's the part where I got to give him a pat on the back, because I really like this guy. I like the way he speaks. He does TED Talks and he does YouTube shows, and I really enjoy most of his work. Because in the end, he does not push medications for ADHD. He uses that as a last resort. So what does he prescribe? Well, he prescribes life management skills. He prescribes diet, exercise, sleep, and supplements. Everything that you really should be prescribing. Now, if you're a parent out there, I think you should exhaust every possibility to get your kid help. Or if you're an adult and you have ADHD, exhaust every possibility to get help other than going straight to amphetamines. It's been shown over and over again that exercise is definitely more beneficial than taking amphetamines. But of course, popping a pill seems to be a lot easier for people, and there's a lot of money behind these pharmaceutical companies pushing all this. So that's why we hear that information when somebody says, well, we have exercise, we have talk therapy where you can improve your thoughts and life skills, but it's best worked in conjunction with drugs. That's because people basically get paid to say that. And if you don't say that, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. So therefore, I'm not that quick to denigrate Dr. Almond, because I don't even know a percentage, but most of the time, he really seems to do a lot of great work. And the Spect Imaging, although I don't think it works in this area, I think it can work in certain areas. And the other thing why I believe Dr. Almond is kind of maligned is because he is aligned with what you would call, let's say, the rich and famous. Some of his clients include Justin Bieber and the Kardashians. Now, if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I believe he is a psychiatrist, you know, why you're putting that out there, that all these people that you have done neuroimaging on their brains, I don't know. Because again, I'm a therapist. These things are supposed to be confidential, so that doesn't look good for Dr. Almond when he is kind of participating in this kind of thing. But anyway, overall, if I had to say, I think he is actually prescribing all the right things for ADHD, and he lives it too. He does follow a good diet, and he exercises, and he gets the correct amount of sleep, so he does do all the right things. Now, it's up to you to make a choice of what you want. If you do want Spect Imaging to figure out if you believe that this could be a way to figure out if you have ADHD, well, insurance is not going to pay for it. That's number one. So you have to come up with about $4,000 of your own money, and that's it. So you got to pay for it upfront in cash. So that's another barrier to that. Continuing, let's go over some ADHD symptoms, just so we're clear on it. And then I'm going to tell you again of other reasons why ADHD is so difficult to diagnose. So here are some examples. Symptoms of ADHD. Short attention span. Well, again, it's hard to figure that out, right? Because the diagnosis of ADHD has been exploding, and it correlates, but you can't say it's caused by. But we live in this digital world. Everybody's on social media. You watch these YouTube shows, everybody wants them under like 5 minutes or whatever it is. Everybody loves TikTok because it's like 30 seconds long. Most people are losing their ability to have a long attention span or deal with just long-term goals in general. This is just a normal thing in our society these days. People want it quick. They want to be able to watch things with no commercials. They want to binge watch shows because, heck, if they have to wait a full week to see another show, you know, our whole society has changed to this instant gratification society. So short attention span, again, difficult to say because I think our whole society is built on short attention spans. Number 2, lack of self-control. Again, as a therapist, but also as a bodybuilder and as a personal trainer for over 30 years, I drive around town and all I see is lack of self-control. All I see is fast food places, and you walk into supermarkets and all this garbage food everywhere. And then when you go to the produce aisle, I'm the only one there. So yeah, there's lack of control everywhere. So again, is that ADHD? No. Continuing, difficulty staying on task. Again, that's a choice because a lot of times they'll say someone with ADHD, they can hyper-focus on the things that they want to. Okay, well that's the tricky word, right? Because of what they want to. There's plenty of people, right, that they focus on things that are not beneficial, but I'm not the judge of that. I can't judge somebody and say, listen, you are spending a lot of time on a couch, you are spending a lot of time reading things that just don't educate you, you are watching a lot of things on TV that don't offer any education whatsoever and don't benefit you. But I'm not here to judge. If somebody spends a lot of time doing that, I can't say that they have a symptom from ADHD because they're not spending time doing something that's beneficial to them. So if they can spend a lot of time on doing something that's not beneficial to them, it is to them most of the time. It's something that they want to do. If they want to spend a lot of time running around town looking for the best pizza, even though they're already overweight and unhealthy, that's not my fault. I can't judge them to say, well, that they're over focusing or hyper focusing on bad food. No. So again, it comes down to a choice. It comes down to meaning and purpose. Who are you as a person? What do you stand for? And what do you want to do in this world? And you only have one body. You live in it. You know, how healthy do you want to keep it? Do you care about it or not? Is your body a temple or is it just an outhouse? You know, you have to make these choices. And I, from the outside, can't say that somebody's making a bad choice and therefore they have ADHD. It makes no sense. People are easily distracted. They refuse to engage in sustained effort, easily frustrated. They deny responsibility. They demand instant gratification. They're defiant towards authority, attention-seeking, disrespect other people's boundaries, mood swings, and they rage and throw tantrums when frustrated or denied. Again, very, very difficult to diagnose ADHD here. Why? Because as you go down this list, if we're being honest, right? Like, I know we live in a day and age where you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but let's be honest, right? If you're an adult with these symptoms, or if you're a child, you're really looking at someone who is lazy, narcissistic, entitled, an immature person, maybe with lack of goals, lack of direction. And what we're looking at too is a lot of these symptoms, they overlap, right? They overlap with mood disorders. They overlap with personality disorders. We're looking at borderline personality disorder, again, for like emotional dysregulation. We're overlapping with narcissistic personality disorder. Again, everything being about them, and they don't want to be bothered by other people. They throw tantrums if somebody frustrates them because they get them off from doing what they want to do. There's anxiety here. Again, like we spoke about before, if you're going to do Spect Imaging and you're going to see somebody's prefrontal cortex not be used as much because they're in their reptilian part of the brain because they have so much anxiety, that's not ADHD. It's also how we're raising kids these days. Like, it's been said so many times over that it's such a cliche at this point, but it's true. If we put young kids into sports and we have them to where they don't even have scores in the game, listen, if they lose a game or they feel the pressure of trying to win a game, that would be age development anxiety that they should go through, because they have to understand that it's better to perform well than not to perform well. And if we're putting these kids through things where nothing matters and all of them get A's anyway, even if they participate in sports or not, or if they're gonna play that there's no score kept, what's gonna happen is that when they go through everyday life, they're gonna go, oh, I have so much anxiety. And they're gonna come to me and think, wow, why do they have anxiety for everything that they do? And then they could get diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder because life itself is too demanding for them. The thought of talking to a new person, saying hello to somebody, meeting somebody, being able to talk to a boss and ask for more money because they think that they're worth it. All of these things are just too much for a person who hasn't gone through the normal human development that we're not putting these kids through. There's plenty of symptoms here that overlap with other things. I could do a whole show on how ADHD symptoms overlap with trauma. One that comes up often is that ADHD symptoms overlap with grief as well. When somebody's going through grief, how are they going to focus on things? How are they going to finish activities that they start? Aren't they going to be disorganized? Of course they are. And these symptoms also overlap with autism. Another thing it overlaps with, permissive parenting. Now, if you Google this and you do some research, there are people out there who don't want to hurt people's feelings that say, well, it doesn't matter what parenting you do, it doesn't affect your child. Who believes that, really? Keep trying to get popular by saying things just to please people. Because, come on, deep down inside, we know that parenting is everything when it comes to raising a child. So let's not say that permissive parenting is okay. Permissive parenting, there's another way to say it with ADHD that I say it, and I say another dad has disappeared. ADHD. Get it? Another dad has disappeared. Now, this is not to trash fathers. I mean this because the letters line up, so that makes sense. But what I really mean is anybody in a caregiver position or a position of authority not doing their job. If you have a child, or even an adult for that matter, I just had a conversation at dinner the other night. Someone was talking about their 20-year-old, and he's got everything laid out for him, everything. And yet still can't go out and get a job, can't do anything. He's got an apartment fully loaded and paid for and all the furniture done and everything else. Still can't do a thing, right? So you have to look back at what happened in the early childhood of what this father was trying to do. But if you're raising a kid with no rules, no structure, no consequences, no rewards for good behavior, and they're just kind of walking around just like they're doing nothing with no rules, you're going to create a person who has ADHD because they don't have any structure in their life. Of course, they're not going to finish activities that they start because there's no penalty for that. Why should they sit down at a certain time and get something done? Nobody's going to do that. It's one of the first things when I do therapy with people that really need a lot of help. The first thing is we just have to start from the beginning. Wake up at the same time every day. Go to bed at the same time every night. Eat at least 3 meals a day. If I ask you how many meals did you have and you don't know, there's a problem. It means that you care so little about your body that you don't even think about it. Meanwhile, you're fueling your body. And then suppose, oh yeah, I just went to 7-Eleven and I grabbed, I don't know, a muffin. Like that's not, come on. That shows ADHD symptoms in itself, doesn't it? But really what it comes down to is not enough care about yourself. Parenting. What do I think should be done? Well, I think all children should be raised with love, with logic, and leadership. Let me say that again, very important. Love, logic, and leadership. What do I mean by leadership? I have to deal with this on a daily basis. Do you know how hard it is to do therapy on a child when their parents or parent is not doing anything to really help this kid out in terms of being a leader? What do I mean? Is the parent taking care of their mind? Do they read things that are important, or do they just scroll through TikTok videos mindlessly? Does the parent take care of their body? Do they do any type of physical activity at all? Do they stretch? Do they do yoga? Do they work out with weights? Do they do anything? Do they even have an interest in sports where they at least turn it on the TV and look at somebody and say, that person's a good athlete? Something to show the kid that that is important. How about finances? I know plenty of parents where it's difficult to get the kid to do schoolwork because they don't see it as being important. Why? Because their parents or parent doesn't do any reading or studying or try to improve themselves in any way. And they live off the government and they're not looking for a job. How is that possible? We have 2 jobs for every person who wants a job in this country, and yet people go 2, 3, 4, 5 years and they're modeling this for their kids. Does this create ADHD? No, because I'm not saying that ADHD is a disease and causes an organic brain disease. What I'm saying is it does cause all the symptoms, or it can possibly lead to many of the symptoms that I've named. Also, when you don't give rules to kids and you don't show them how to be structured and you don't show them how to reach for a goal and put them in a position where they need to reach a goal, where something's expected of them, and hopefully they fail a few times so they can get back up and try it again. If you don't do any of that, it causes emotional dysregulation. They think that everything should be handed to them, and that's just the way it is. They think the parents should hand something to them, they think society should hand something to them, and they don't take accountability or responsibility for anything. So this show's about 25 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep this right about here. I've got a ton of more things to say about this, but let me just finish with this. Again, ADHD is extremely difficult to diagnose. What you'll see is that it's diagnosed more and more with the way our society is getting, because we're not raising our children correctly. That's number one. We also have these kids that are sitting at home all the time, and they're not having any skills in terms of social interactions. That's also going to cause ADHD symptoms in the form of anxiety. And if you don't have these kids try to perform well, like in school plays or sports, of course, when they're told to focus on something that might be a little bit important, the blood flow is going to go to the fear center of the brain. Because with most of these kids today, the fear center of the brain is being triggered just by leaving the house. Let's be honest about this. Again, let's go back to Dr. Almond. Seems like a good enough guy. Don't want to trash him too much. I don't believe that Spect Imaging can determine ADHD, and I'm in agreement with probably 99.9% of other professionals in this regard, but I do think he's doing good work by pushing life management skills, diet, exercise, sleep, and supplements. So let me leave it right there. Hopefully this was good for you in some way. Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you can tell other people this message. I'm Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Thank you.